Joe Schneider.
Yay! Hi! All right, I'm gonna do my best not to suck because I'm the only thing standing between you and the lightning talks and getting out of here. So I can hold you all hostage. Okay, I need to tell a story. Back in the olden days, when I was but a little lad, there was this little game called Doom. And it was really cool at the time because it not only put out the game, but it put out the tools for you to make your own levels. And I thought that was really cool at the time because we didn't have anything like that except maybe board games where you made up your own rules to sorry and everybody was sorry. I love expandable architectures like that. Like, it got me super interested. Of course, I grew up on Legos. I was before Minecraft, or I probably would have loved it if it was around when I was a kid. But I love this idea of being able to take something and extend it and make it something of my own. And so I've been a big fan of plugin architectures. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about how to make a plugin architecture. Really, I'm gonna talk about 3 libraries that I don't think get a lot of play, but they're kind of cool and kind of interesting. And that's pkgutil, importlib, and inspect. But I'm gonna do that by taking you through building an expandable application with plugins. So let's level set on what we think a plugin is. A plugin, by my definition, is you have an application that's a host application. It raises events. It says when it's doing something. Plugins are optional components that can respond to those events. When user does this, I can go do this other thing as a result. The classic example is extensions in your browser, right? The host application, the browser, provides buttons for you to interact with as the user. It provides the URL bar, provides back buttons and forward buttons, and it raises events when the user interacts with those things. Those extensions can interact with those events and do things on your behalf, right? We've all used browser extensions before, right? Right. Plugins are designed to be optional. They can be there, they can not be there. They are loosely coupled from the regular application. I like this diagram as kind of a shorthand of a good way to explain how plugins work. The user interacts with the host application sends signals that a thing has happened, and the plugins can respond to that thing happening, right? Everybody's with me on what plugins are and plugin architecture? Everybody understands why plugin architecture is cool? All right, talk done, bye y'all. No. There's a little more to it than that. Okay, so plugins are designed to be optional. Well, what's the best way to explain how plugins work? How about we build an application that uses plugins? Sound like a good plan? Sweet. I like to start my applications with requirements because I'm boring. This is the way that I am. But I like having an idea of what I'm gonna do. So we're gonna go on a quest. We're gonna build an application. We're gonna build a little command line application called file info. Guess what file info is gonna do? It's going to print out information from files. I am not on the naming committee. It is going to send a single event whenever it encounters a new file. What it is going to do by default is it's going to print out the basic information of a file, how big it is, the full path to it, and what type of file it is, right? Because those are common to every file. But I want to make it expandable so that you can create a plugin to give more specific information about more specific types. Like, say you have an image file and you want the dimensions of that. Say you get an Excel file and you want to know how many rows and columns and how many worksheets there are in there. You should be able to get that information, right? A plugin author should be able to create a plugin to give you that information. So, file info is going to expose a single event. Now we talk about how we want to deal with plugins. Since I'm covering dynamic stuff, I like to, kind of like Lynn was saying, think about the user experience of these things. And I have 2 users that I have to worry about. I have the user that's actually using file info, and I have the plugin developer who's developing a plugin for file info. They both, I need to make a good experience for both of them, right? Right? Right, okay. This is the audience participation portion. Feel free to, I don't know, whatever. So for plugin, I want to make things as easy as possible. So for the user, I want file info to discover plugins by itself. I don't want the user to have to tell it where the plugins are. I want my file info to just go find all of the plugins. So the rules that I'm going to have here is that a plugin is going to be any top-level module that's name begins with file info and ends with plugin and has one of my plugin functions in there. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Plugins for file info are just going to be functions. They're going to be simple functions that are going to be passed the path object to the file that they're finding, and they're gonna return an iterable of strings. They could return a list, a tuple, a set, they could return a generator, whatever, as long as it's all strings, because that's what I'm gonna print out to the user. With me? Yes. Sweet. Any exceptions raised by calling a plugin are going to be logged at the debug level and then squelched, because I don't want the host application to crash. I want it to be as robust as possible. I'm gonna log those things at debug level and move on. All functions that can respond to a file will respond to a file. And since we're doing logging, we're gonna use the Python logging library. I use the Python logging library in everything. What I'm letting the plugin developer know is anything that you're not logging to the user probably should be logged at debug level, otherwise it'll get logged to the user. As far as the plugins, we're gonna build 2 plugins. We're gonna build a text plugin. It's gonna be called File Info Text Plugin. Again, I am not on the naming committee. It is going to print out how many lines and how many words are in there. We won't get cute or pedantic about the definition of lines or words. Lines are the number of substrings separated by new lines, and words are the number of substrings separated by spaces that are not empty. Good. Then we're gonna do a CSV plugin. This is gonna be using the CSV module. It's our special guest star of this talk. We're gonna use it to extract the number of rows and columns in there. Everybody with me on this one so far? Everybody like? All right, so we got our requirements in hand. Yay, our product owner is happy. Now we can set off to designing. There's a lot of different ways you can slice this. So let me talk about some of the things I didn't decide to do. Thinking about the requirements. Spoiler alert, I'm gonna do a decorator to decorate functions. But let's talk about through all the other things I didn't do. Plugin classes. Classes for plugins are really, really great if you've got multiple events, or your plugins are gonna need to manage state, or both. If you're not gonna need to do those, then a class is probably overkill. If I were gonna do a class, this is my O.J. Simpson if I did it, I would probably do an abstract base class for the interface. This is just so we can ensure that all of the plugins fit the interface that I need them to. And then I'd create a concrete class that implements that ABC. That's a simple class that anybody can subclass. Basically, the idea is any subclass of my ABC is a plugin that I can go and find and load. Yay. I have done this for something that I have written. This program is much simpler. We don't need all that overhead, so we're just gonna skip that. I could do like PyTexas does and do specifically named functions. They're really more hooks than plugins, right? If thine has a function named this with this signature, then by golly, it looks like a plugin and I will run it. I don't like doing those. I don't like them because number one, there's no easy way to pass metadata. There's no way for me to say this is only valid in these certain contexts and not in others. And there's no good, easy way for it to manage scope. You basically have to use the global or the module scope to do things, and that's icky. That's a scientific term, icky. I just learned about entry points about 3 months ago. Here's why I eschewed entry points. It puts a lot of effort on the plugin developer. It gives them a lot of power. They get to say what is and isn't a plugin, but it also gives them the responsibility of having to say what is and isn't a plugin. The way that I'm going to do it is easy. Any function that's got my decorator on it is a plugin. Developer doesn't have to do anything else. There's examples and stuff in the documentation. There's way more documentation that I'm going to go through in here. You are welcome to go back. There's even a whole bonus section that I'm not going to go through today unless y'all just really want me to keep going. I love decorators. If you don't believe me, go see my talk from last year where I gave about 4 different types of decorators and places that I use them. I think decorators are amazing. This is a really neat type of decorator that I call a tagging decorator. It's like one of those little tags that they put on animals that they're tracking out in the wild. I'm going to tag a function with an attribute and then release it back into the module so that I can find it later. So here is the code for that decorator, and because y'all have made me zoom in, I'm gonna have to scroll through it a little bit, but I'm gonna walk through what it's doing here. First off, note this, remember it, sear it into your brain, you wanna look at it later. I created a string constant for the attribute name, and this is so that I have that code in one place. If I decide to change the attribute name, like I find out that this isn't working for some reason, I only have to change it in one place and everything works. This is good practice, you should do this. I also created my logger. And this is my decorator. Notice my decorator collects more than one pattern. It can take as many patterns as you want to give it for different types of files. You're marking this plugin matches these types of files, okay? I don't want to get bogged down in explaining regex, but these are regex patterns. It can take one or more. Makes it easy to use. What it's going to do is it's going to return a wrapper function, and what that wrapper function is going to do is take whatever function you put this decorator on, it's going to create an attribute that is a set of those patterns. If there's already an attribute with a set of those patterns, it's just going to add the patterns to it. Cool, cool? Anybody want to guess why I did that way? So if you want to stack more than one decorator on there, they'll just add on to it. Makes it nice and easy, very portable. And then we're just going to return the original function without doing anything else. Most decorators return a function in the function's place that they're decorating. This one doesn't. It returns the original function, but now modified, changed, if you will. It didn't come out the same. It has seen some stuff. All right. So we've explained how that works. Now let's talk about how we're going to apply the decorator. Fun part, I used the stones to destroy the stones. I used the decorator to do the default case. Everybody knows that regex.star is anything, right? So this will match any type of file, even files that have no extension. Yay! And this is the default case. I'm using a simple generator to return the full path, to return the file type, and I had to handle the case where there is no extension, so I just returned the word file in its place, and the size in bytes. Cool, cool? By the way, pathlib, use it in everything. It is fantastic. All right, now comes the fun part. This is where I get to explain all the fun things that I learned. All of this I learned through trial and error. This gray hair and this gray hair and these gray hairs came from some of the things that I learned here. In order to find plugins, we got like a 4-step process here, right? We need to get a list of all of the accessible Python modules, right? For each module that we find, we need to import that module so that we can get at all the sweet, sweet objects inside, right? Yeah? If the module has submodules, then we probably want to go crawl all of those recursively as well, right? Because somebody may have stuck their plugins in a package in a module that's inside the package, and so we want to be able to go and find all of those, right? Right. That means as the developer, you can put your plugins wherever you want in your code, and we will find them. We will Liam Neeson those things. And fourth, we want to iterate through all of the objects in the module's namespace to find the plugin. So we're going to go through everything that's in there. So enter my three amigos, my friends here. This is the Steve Martin one, pkgutil. What it does is it provides functions and stuff for navigating the package structure. There are two methods that we're going to talk about. There's walk packages and there's iter modules. Walk packages, use with care. Walk packages goes through every module in namespace, imports it looking for submodules, and returns each one along the way. Here's the important lesson that I learned the hard way. It imports them. Hey, guess what? What happens when you import anti-gravity? Your browser pops up a window with an XKCD comic. When you're looking for plugins, you don't want that to happen. What happens when you import unit test? It tries to start running unit tests. You don't want that to happen. So you probably don't want to import every module that's out there. Enter iter modules. What iter modules does is just returns the names of the top level modules without loading anything. The trade-off is you can't see what submodules are inside, because in order to see what submodules are inside, you have to import the original package, right? Everybody's with me so far? It's all clear as mud. So what we do is we use iter modules to skim along the top, and if what we get is a package, then we can use walk modules to get all of the other ones down there, right? Walk packages to go get all of the submodules underneath there. That way we can do it with care, right? And that way we can do it without importing any of the other things that aren't something that starts with file info and ends with plugin. There we go. I have to keep you guys awake. It's late in the afternoon. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about, this is the Chevy Chase of the modules. This is importlib. Importlib provides you a really simple module, or a really simple function called import module, that you give it a string with the name of the module, and it returns to you the module object. It loads it. Everybody's familiar with that first box, right? Where you do import os.path. Everybody's done that before? Right. What if os.path is in a string? Well, then you need importlib in order to pull it in. It's really simple. We just do importlib.import module. We give the module name as a string. Bada bing, bada boom. We get a module object back. Cool, cool? Sweet. All right, last. This is the Martin Short of the group. Inspect. Inspect is Python's module for inspecting live objects. This is a live fire drill. You have been issued actual ammunition for this. What it does is it provides a lot of different methods and functions for being able to find specific types of objects from an object, a module, whatever is loaded at runtime. It is able to introspect and reflect everything to go find something. That was a lot of words to say it can look at things and find things for you. In this particular case, I'm gonna use some really useful functions that are in there. I'm gonna use getMembers to iterate through all of the members that are in the module, all of the things that are defined at the module level. And I'm gonna use its isFunction predicate function to go find things that are functions, right? Things that are defined with a def keyword and are functions. Not things that are bound to classes or anything like that, straight functions. Everybody's with me so far? All right, so let's put all of this together. First, we want to be able to identify a plugin function. This is the simplest thing we need to do, right? So we want to create a little simple function that, given any object, tells you whether it is a function that has our attribute on it, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create this little function, the isPluginFunc. Again, I'm not on the naming committee. Okay, I was the naming committee for this one. That's going to take an object and it's going to return true or false. True if it is what I'm looking for, and false if this is not the droids that I'm looking for. It can go about its business. I'm going to use inspect.isFunction, so it's got to be a function, and it has to have my attribute on it. Cool, cool? All right. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load plugin functions from module given its name. So this is, I'm given a module name as a string, and I want to get a list of all of the functions with their associated pattern. Make sense? I'm going to return a list of 2 element tuples. That first element is going to be that regex pattern. That second is going to be that function that can be called. Cool? I'm going to do that by importing the module, and then I'm going to iterate through each of the members in the module, looking for the ones that pass my isPluginFunc test. And for each of the type patterns that's on that attribute, I'm going to go add to that list of tuples. Is anybody mystified by any of this code? Good, this is good, easy magic. All right, step 3. Now we need to go find all of the modules, working backwards, right? So we can identify a function, we can now find a function within a module, now we have to go find all the modules, right? So I created this function called findAllFunctions. What it's gonna do is it's gonna go through each module, it's gonna test if that module fits my naming scheme. If it doesn't, it's just gonna skip and go to the next one. If it matches that naming scheme, it's gonna check to see, is this a package? If it's a package, it's going to go walk and call itself recursively, right? And if it's not, it's going to go look for all of the functions that are in that module. If there's any exceptions importing anything, we're going to log those quietly to debug, indicate that we're skipping it, we're going to move on to the next thing. Again, we want our host application to be bulletproof. Pandy's going to try to crash it later. He's going to find some way. I'm not going to be happy about it, but it worked on my machine. All right, everybody with me so far on all of this? This is magic code. All right, so now that we have all of our plugins, there's one other line I want to call your attention to, and that's this line. This is how we get our default case. So our default case is in a module that does not begin with file info and end with plugins, but we want to make sure it always gets loaded. So again, I used the stones to destroy the stones. I used my own function to find something in the current namespace. Yay. Okay, so this gives us all the nuts and bolts we need to load plugins. Is anybody mystified by anything with loading plugins? Because it gets really easy from here. Let's go through implementing the plugins. Hey, these are quick and easy and dumb. I import my little decorator, I create a function, I decorate it with my decorator, and then I do what I need to do inside the function. Easy peasy? Easy? Easy? Cool. Same with comma separated value ones. This one was a little harder because I actually had to use the CSV reader. Okay, it wasn't that much harder, it was one extra line of code. But easy peasy, you get everything that you need. anybody who's interested, by the way, all of this code is actually in the files. These things that you see here are excerpts. mkdocs is just excerpting the actual code out here. This is all working code. We're going to run it in just a minute. All right, so now that we got our plugins, now we're ready for the main event. We have to put together a command line interface to do all of this stuff. We can load plugins, now we need to do things with plugins, right? All right, so let's think about how the user's gonna use this stuff. I'm gonna do a dunder main.py so that I can very easily do python-m file info. Cool, cool? If anybody's not come across dunder main.py, when you run python-m and you give it the name of a module, so in this case file info, it goes and finds the package file info, it goes and looks for a dunder main.py, and if it's there, it goes and executes that module. Cool? So we use that to do it. I am going to just go ahead and create a command line processor. So this is a little simple function for getting a command line. It uses argparse. I think argparse is fantastic because it's in the standard library. And once you read through the documents and understand how to use it, it's pretty easy peasy to use and very powerful. So I'm going to create one with a simple, it's going to take an argument that's going to be one or more paths, understanding that users are fickle things and may give us paths that coincide or inside each other, like they may give us a parent and a child path, they may give us a path to a file or a path to a folder or a path that doesn't exist. They may give us a path to nowhere. So we need to be able to handle all of those scenarios. If we run it with --help, we get this. This is our really simple command line interface, easy peasy, right? Cool. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use our find all functions to load all of our plugins. We already did all the heavy work there, so we just gotta call that function. It'll give us a nice list of 2-element tuples with all of our regex patterns and all of our functions. Cool, cool? Next, we're gonna turn paths into lists of file paths. Remember when I said users are evil and will like to do evil things to you? Let's handle all that evilness. When they give us all of those paths, we're gonna go through each of those paths. We're gonna go test and see if it's a file, and if it's a file, we're just gonna add it on there. If it's not a file, then we're just gonna assume that it's a folder, and we're gonna use rglob, the recursive glob, to go find everything that's a file inside of there. If the path doesn't exist, it's fine. rglob will just give us back nothing. This is a really simple way to get us a list of all of the files. And since users may give us paths that are inside of each other or things like that, I'm gonna go ahead and just use a set to store all of those paths in so it nicely deduplicates everything for me. And then I'm just gonna sort all of that stuff so I get a nice deterministic order every time. And then for each file, there's a simple function that's gonna process that file. What it's gonna do is for each file that it comes across, it's gonna go pull all of the plugins, and it's gonna go through each one testing, does this plugin work for this file? If it does, it's gonna go call it and add all of the things that it outputs into the output. And then we just do a little main block using all of those functions that we've defined. And now I can go here. Y'all get to see how much of a spaz I am when I type. All right, I'm gonna do python-m file info --help. Bam. So far so good, right? I created a folder with some sample files. That is assuming I can find said files. Oh yeah, I have to remember, I'm not on Windows. And it doesn't like backslashes. But hey, simple case, it worked. Notice our text file has the number of lines and words. Our CSV file has the number of rows and columns. Cool, right? Does anybody want to see like behind the curtain? Does anybody want to see more about how the sausage gets made? Let's run it with -v. -v gives us all of the logging output. So I'll start from the top. We're gonna try to load up all of the plugins. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna see that we're importing fileinfo.plugins. We found a plugin, so we're adding it. We're gonna skip fileinfo because it doesn't end with, there we go. We're gonna import fileinfo CSV plugin because it does fit our name, and we're gonna find a function that matches CSV. Pretty cool. Go through all of this stuff. You see all these other ones that we're skipping? They don't start with, and they don't end with. Sweet. See, y'all are getting it. That's all right. We're going to be singing around before long. After we've done all of our plugin loading, now we go through and actually process all of our all of our different files. So we loaded our three plugin, our handler functions, and then we start processing each of the different files. You can see here where we're calling each of the different plugins, and you can see how it's working. Cool? All of this code is up in GitHub. I encourage you to download it, play around with it, break it, remake it into something else, address problems and stuff that I put in here. I probably put a few in, not on purpose, but maybe. There is also an entire bonus section in here. I put a bunch of references to everything I went and read, and I did go and read all of this stuff in preparation for all of this. And I even put in a bonus thing for how to write events in Python, because Python doesn't have a native event type like C# and Java and a bunch of other languages do, but it's really easy to make one. So I showed how to make one, and then I give you, here's some mods for some common problems that you might have with this really, really simple implementation. So feel free to take a look at those, and I'm around if you have questions. There we go.
We do have questions, including, by the way, and I haven't paid close attention to this all day, but this might be the most upvoted question I have seen all day, maybe all weekend. Are you ready?
I am in the question answering position. Go.
Was that Comic Sans in your IDE?
I love this. So it is actually a font called Comic Sans, which is a version of Comic Sans.
Oh, Josh.
It would help if I could type, but yeah, Comic Sans. It is a nerd font.
Sans.
I'm happy to share my prompt configuration for Oh My Posh if anybody wants to play around with it.
Be sure to link that font on Discord, because I know everyone's going to want Comic Sans in their VS Code.
It's, having Comic Sans as your IDE font is a lot like doing technical with this accent when you start talking about decorators and iterators, and people just deduct 50 IQ points, but it works against it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't know what to do with that. The question, and I don't remember where you were in the talk when this came in, but is this more or less how Flask blueprints work?
I've never worked with that before, so I have no idea.
I have used Flask blueprints before, but I don't think I have ever looked at how they're implemented.
And my original idea for the talk, so this came out of, I wrote a scripting framework where I work that has a plugin-based architecture. I wrote this. The reason why I wrote my own plugin architecture rather than using one of the existing libraries like Pluggy or some of the others is, number one, I wanted full control over how plugins and plugin loading worked. And number two, I didn't want extra third-party dependencies. I work in an environment that is very, very security conscious. Every third-party dependency that we use is another third-party dependency I got to keep up with security information about, license information about, maintainer information. Every time there's some supply chain attack, I've got to go check through all of my packages. So I wanted to not have to deal with it for this particular case. So I might be aping what some other frameworks and stuff already have. I did it so that I could have my own. And that's the reason why you might want to write your own. You may not want to introduce the extra third-party dependencies and have the extra load.
Related to that,
okay,
are there any resources or best practices you recommend to help limit plugin functionality for user safety?
Ooh. I mean, since you control the system here, you can go as wild with that as you want. There's a lot of things that I could have done and things that I have done in other systems. One of the reasons I like plugin classes is since I can use the class hierarchy and all that stuff to find plugins, but it's also nice because I can also use it to limit what plugins do. So if I define what methods are going to be called on events, then only those methods are going to be called on events, and I define the signature that those expect, right? I define all of that by my main class, and everybody that subclasses it has to follow that if they're following good solid principles. If they're not, I make no guarantees that their plugin's going to work, and that's when I log stuff, debug, and move on.
Last one.
Okay.
Can you put flags for your plugins in the CLI with this architecture? I think what they're asking is there a way, how would you tweak that to support parameters coming in from the CLI for the plugins to access?
I have done similar things before, like in our scripting framework. I can control with which paths. By default, I'm looking on Python path here, but I could just as easily add in command line arguments to say, these are the paths I want you to go search for plugins, and thereby control where it's loading plugins from. The other thing that I could do is add in something to say, maybe -- exclude, and give a regex pattern, and any module name that matches this regex pattern will just get skipped and moved on, and we don't load plugins from that. Or a regex pattern for these plugin names. If you see them, just don't load them. Just ignore them. It's not hard to do. It's just more that has to be wired in, so more information that has to be passed. Again, if you live in mine and Pandy's world, unit test the snot out of that stuff to make sure that it works correctly. You'll actually probably want that type of functionality for unit testing, to be able to unit test your plugin specifically. So,
awesome.
That helped?
All right.
Sweet.
I need a few things from you guys. First and foremost, help me thank Josh for his presentation on plugins.